I'm Stila Webb.
And I'm Shuvom.
I'm going to write my first fiction novel this year.
And I'm going to film it.
And we're going to release one video each week.
And if you keep up with Stila's word count, by the end of 2017, you'll have...
Wasza kniga w tym godu.
Oh, that was terrible.
Alright, we're coming to you from our basement studios this week. Our previous videos were filmed upstairs in our kitchen, which had the benefit of being climate controlled, but it had the downside of requiring us to take down all the lights each week if we wanted to eat.
It was really annoying. So hopefully down here in our unheated, unfurnished basement, we'll get better lighting, even if it is... Oh god, it is so cold down here.
Oh, God. But we'll keep you posted on the temperature of our basement studio as we go along. But today we're talking about world building.
If you're writing a fictional story, then you're going to have to build a fictional world for your fictional people to live in.
So we're going to go through the world for Stila's book, urban fantasy book, Catcalled, and we'll give you some tips on how to create a fictional world for your own fantasy or sci-fi book. Oh god.
Oh god. I'm going to get a scarf.
I'm going to get a jacket.
There are two main things you have to keep in mind when you're world building. There's what the author needs to know in order to make a good, consistent, and interesting world, and then there's what the reader needs to know in order to enjoy that world. The author needs to know a lot more than the reader does, and that's usually a big mistake that new writers make.
The main point here is what the author needs to know is much, much bigger than what the reader needs to know in the actual book.
For instance, for Catcalled, I literally have floor plans for the main characters' houses. I am not even kidding. I have pictures of what the outside looks like. The reader doesn't need this. I don't need to put this in the beginning. I don't need to describe this to the reader. I just want to know so that I don't screw up and have people going into rooms in places where rooms aren't.
So I guess it's a good chance for us to go over our first world building pro tip.
Yeah, what is that?
Just something I made up.
Awfully aggressive.
So, this is from my first novel, Infinity Squad 1. It was a military tactical science fiction thing where they're leaving from the base and fighting aliens, and it's all about logistics and tactics and strategy. Here's a little peek behind the curtain. I had no map for that entire book. All I need to know is when they left their base, is the enemy close or far? A lot of people, like Tolkien, a lot of people would make a map. Oh, this lake is here, this swamp is to the west, this mountain range is to the north. I made a little sketch, but very, very rough. That way, when I left the base, I just cut to them being at the enemy side. You need a lot less than you think you need. Show them the protractor.
Okay, so for my science fiction short story, I have a world that rotates very slowly, so the days are excruciating long, as are the nights. So I actually took a protractor. You can't really see it, but that's okay.
They can see a protractor.
And I had to figure out how long our sun, how long it took it to move each degree, and then change that into another planet to figure out how long everything was. I'm never going to explain this to the people reading. I'm just going to have the sun be in certain places at certain times. That's all. But this keeps me consistent. He would never do that.
No.
This took like an hour of research.
I, in fact, don't think that level needs to be done. And if you explained it, again, if you explained it in the actual book, it would be super, super boring. That firmly lives out here, and I even think it lives out in the don't need to know section. You probably don't need to know how your planets rotate around the sun, unless it becomes very, very interesting to the plot. Unless it's like a clockwork story or something.
Well, this was a little important to the plot, but the biggest issue is sometimes there are pieces of information that you, the author, need to know just to feel comfortable writing it, but you don't actually have to know it to write it. Does that make sense to you?
Nope. But that was our first world building pro tip.
You're not doing it again, are you? Oh god.
Alright. Oh god, it's getting colder. Alright,
It is.
For example, if you're building a fantasy world, how the money works in the world, how many pieces of silver are for a piece of gold, probably, unless it becomes a really important, you probably don't need to know.
Yeah, or only do it for that one particular scene. If you have somebody making change, just figure out how much it is for that one scene. That's it. You don't have to write the entire economy of the place. Just, yeah, 10 silver, 1 gold, done.
You'll be surprised as a first-time author how much stuff you can make up on the fly. Again, for Infinity Squad 1, a lot of times I'm like, I need a swamp here, and I would just make a swamp. Because if the reader doesn't have a map and I don't have a map, I can put it there. As long as you're consistent once the swamp is established. But, no, you can be like, 10 silver to 1 gold. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'll steal that from D&D. That's cool.
So speaking of that, Catcalled.
Yes.
Give us a real quick, what's the world? It's our normal human world, but there's magic and gods in it.
It's our normal human world, but the world division of Norse mythology is real, and in each one of those lives a bunch of people, and they use the Bifrost to move around.
So what are some stuff that you need to know that the reader will never know in your book?
Probably the layout of the house. That's definitely up there on things that the
house,
reader's
that
never
house
going to
layout.
know. They're just never going to know. I just want to be consistent that if I leave the living room and take a right and end up in the dining room, that 2 chapters later I don't take a left and end up in the dining room.
So again, 2 different philosophies here. I didn't even have a map of my base until the very final climax. I'm like, I should probably have the map laid out so I know where they're going. But versus having the house layout before you even start writing the book.
I'm a perfectionist, what can I say? The big trick, though, is to make sure you don't delve too deep into what you're doing. Even if you're a perfectionist, understand that everything you do for world building has to serve the story. Good rule of thumb, military guys love it, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't overdo your research, don't get into a bunch of stuff you don't need, and don't do what George R. R. Martin does and spend pages and pages describing livery that doesn't matter, mean anything, or have any influence on the story whatsoever.
When I first read the first Game of Thrones book, he was talking about the crests and the colors of each family so much. I started memorizing them because I'm like, this has got to be important.
This has to mean something. This is going to be
something.
vital later. This is a clue.
Around the second and a half book, I'm like, oh my god, why am I writing all this stuff down? I don't need to know the crest of any family.
It's pure, livery porn.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's just bad.
Again, it's the difference between what directly affects the plot, what serves the story, and what's there to make the world lived in. This brings us to world building pro tip number 2.
Oh, I wasn't ready for it.
Alright, world building pro tip number 2 is steal your template. Everyone thinks when you're world building, you're going to start off with a clean blank sheet of paper, and that's not true. If you think about one of the most immersive books of all time, Dune, oh this doesn't show up at all.
Dune, Arrakis, desert planet.
If you think about one of the most immersive books of all time, Dune by Frank Herbert, it's a beautifully lived-in, defined world. It's a dry, dusty desert planet. It's populated by a fierce tribe of desert warriors. And the Imperial powers are only interested in it because of one resource that they can extract from the planet that powers all of interstellar travel and economy. This is just the space Middle East with sandworms. That's all it is. So, don't think you have to create a whole world from scratch. You can just take the Middle East and add sandworms and get Dune.
History has done a lot of your work for you. There's so many stories and interesting conflicts that have happened in our world. There's so many cultures, so many meetings of cultures. It's great. Just take it from there. That's what George R. R. Martin did.
Yeah. If you like Game of Thrones, it's literally just the English Civil War plus magic.
Yeah.
So it's the War of the Roses with all the intrigue and the backstabbing and the fallen houses and the jockeying of the throne with magic and dragons. So
Easy.
Yeah. So that's writing pro tip, world building pro tip number 2 is steal your template. Take something that already exists and add one more thing to it. Pro tip!
I don't think I like this one.
So when you take your template and you add your one cool thing to it, the War of the Roses plus magic, just to figure out what's important and what's not, figure out how that affects your day-to-day life. Like, how does having dragons in the world affect an average peasant's day-to-day life? And just focus on that. You don't need to make crests and languages and politics and history. How does it affect their day-to-day life?
And how does it affect your main character and the characters that they interact with? Because that's primarily what you're writing about, are just those characters.
Yeah. I know how being in the basement is affecting me.
Yeah.
Do you want to get some coats?
I really do.
It's getting colder. Hold on. Okay, so this is what happens when you film in an So this is what happens when you film in an unheated basement in the middle of New England winter. A lot of you guys out there are probably saying, why can't you turn the heaters on? And we tried that, and you would hear nothing in the microphone except for the sounds of the heaters. So,
Yeah.
hopefully the winter won't last too long. We'll be in the summer soon.
Just another month or two. You'll be fine.
Alright, what are we talking about next? Our next pro tip. No. Nope. Hold on. So what are we talking about next?
Research. So we've told you a whole bunch about what you shouldn't bother getting to know, but what you need to know to write your book, you need to know. Don't be afraid to read books. These are all books on mythology. Pro tip, half of them come from the kids section. So if you need to do anything with mythology, look in the kids section first. It's
Hold
really
on.
helpful.
Pro tip!
I almost dropped my books. I'm not going to use everything I read in here. I'm not even going to read all of these books. I'm just going to go through them and cherry pick the information I need, and then I'm going to dig into that information. Don't be afraid to go to the library and read actual books. It's really the best resource.
But if you're trying to figure out how real soldiers talk, go talk to a few of them. Go hang out with them. Go on Reddit. There's a lot of things you can do with the internet of finding out how real people do things. Books are great for kind of dry facts, I find. But if I want to find out how a Canadian person curses, I'm going to go to YouTube.
Yeah, if you want to know something like how much does a sword really weigh,
Oh,
that's a great thing to go on the internet for. But the whole point of doing research is to avoid this.
so this is a list of really bad fantasy novel cliches that young writers fell into because they didn't do their research. We found this from a couple places on the internet, people making fun of it.
We'll put a link in the description down below for it.
Yeah. For example, do your fantasy characters just treat your horses as cars with legs?
They just ride up to the inn and get off and leave it there?
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, but they have to take the saddle off, they have to curry the horse, they have to water the horse, they have to feed the horse, they have to put a blanket on the horse, put it somewhere warm where it can sleep, then they get to go into the inn and eat.
Does your fantasy party stop at the side of the road and instantly 15 minutes later are eating a hearty, well-cooked stew?
Stew takes hours, so many hours. I know I make stew and I have to cook it all day. They can make soup, they can have jerky, they can have travel bread, but it also takes like an hour just to set up a camp.
Does your main hero effortlessly weave a broadsword around, but when the female love interest tries to pick it up, the sword's too heavy for her to pick up? Swords aren't that heavy. Again, do your research, and it helps you keep you from make like simple mistakes everyone on the internet will make fun of you for.
Yeah, and there's so many things on just YouTube alone here that you can see videos of people making and wielding swords, riding horses, making camp, how to cut and split wood. These are things that are readily available.
Oh god, the temperature box is getting lower. You can hear I don't know if you guys can hear the wind blowing outside, but this is true New England winter. It's time for writing pro tip number 3!
Oh gods. No.
Pro tip!
No, oh god, no!
So here's pro tip number 3, something we call in our writers group the capital letter game. This wasn't invented by me, this was invented by one of our fellow writers, Chandler Gable, and it goes something like this. If you have a sentence like this in your book, things had never been the same since the war between the northern robots and the southern clones that decided the fate of our presidential leader. That's an okay sentence, but what if you had a sentence more like this? Things had never been the same since the Fourth Summoner War.
And that's it, that's all you have to say.
Yeah. So the second sentence isn't that much cooler, doesn't make you anticipate a lot more, and all we did is take out specifics and put in something with a capital letter.
We took out the exposition and we added mystery.
Yeah. You can add almost any kind of capital letter to this. And things have never been the same since the eclipse or the event.
I mean, think about how we talk about world events now. We just refer to the Civil War as the Civil War. We don't explain to each other, as you know, Bob, the North and the South of the United States fought a war, and it had great repercussions. Nobody talks like that. Yeah. I mean, even
in the Civil War, they would just call it the war.
Yeah, while it's going on, it's just the war. It's just World War I. Okay. Star Wars A New Hope does the same thing. He just says the Old Republic, and that's all you know about it at that point.
Yeah. And yeah, Obi-Wan even says the Clone Wars, and it was so cool when you watch
the Clone Wars.
What were the Clone Wars? What happened?
Oh my god, so interesting.
And then we got the actual movie about the Clone Wars. So in summary, never film in an unheated basement in the middle of New England winter.
Are we almost done? I'm cold.
We got one more section to go.
No, we don't.
No, we can do this.
No, we don't.
Here, we can make it a little bit warmer. So, in summary, remember our tips. There's a big difference between what you need to know as a writer and what the audience needs to know. So keep those different.
Steal your template from history.
And if you ever need to make your story more mysterious or put some texture to the world on the cheap, play the capital letter game.
And always remember to do your research so that what you do know is right.
Yeah. Alright, let's go upstairs.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Just to let you know we're not kidding, I'm going to take the camera off the tripod. Here's our basement studio with the lights. Here's Stila petting our actual dog. And this is why the temperature kept dropping in the studio, because this is the actual New England weather today.